Welcome to Behind the Line, the podcast where you'll get untold stories from first responders and military veterans. I'm Tim Hegman. I'll be your host. My guest today served 11 and a half years active and reserve in the United States Air Force and rose to the rank of Staff Sergeant. And in 1999, he became a police officer with the Austin Police Department. On September 25th, 2010, he responded to a threatening man with a gun call, which resulted in him being involved in an officer-involved shooting. As a result, Javier Bustos was awarded the Austin Police Department's Medal of Valor. Javier served 23 years working with the Austin Police Department, and working all those years as a patrol officer. In 2022, after an incredible law enforcement career, he decided to retire. However, he has not stopped serving others. Javier, welcome to the Behind the Line podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's really cool to be here with you, and thank you for coming down to the great state of Texas to join me.
Well, I appreciate that. I've had a nice warm welcome from you and so many others, so thank you. I have not been to Texas in a long time.
Yeah, well, we are the friendship state.
Yeah, but I will say I had a great experience in Texas back in 1984 when I was in the Air Force and was at Lackland Air Force Base.
Yes.
For a brief period of time, and then I went up to northern Texas to Wichita Falls,
right,
to Shepherd Air Force Base, and spent a lot of time in Texas doing my basic training and then my technical training, if you will.
Yeah, you know, Lackland Air Force Base, the home of basic training, which
yes.
San Antonio, my hometown. And so I didn't have to go far for basic training.
Yeah, that's good.
But you got to taste a little bit of Texas then, but of course it was different then for you.
A lot different.
Yeah, now we're just two old airmen just chewing the fat, right?
You know what? That's okay. That's okay. We can talk about our life's experiences, lessons learned.
Yes, definitely.
For sure. And share some great stories in between. So, yeah. How are you doing today, by the way?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. It's a good day. Drove into Austin, which I've done since I've retired, but it's always a different feeling. Because I can remember the days when I would drive into work saying, God, one day I'll be retired. And I'll be driving to the city, and it's going to be a whole different feeling. And now I'm there. Yeah. Now I'm driving to Austin. It's like, it's a whole different feeling. I'm actually smiling more.
Oh, hey, I can, I remember that feeling. I actually remember my last day of work before I retired, driving to work, and then my leaving the parking lot thinking, man, I was there 30 years, and a lot's changed in those 30 years.
Oh, you're correct. You know, when I drove out on the last day, I was really happy. I got in the vehicle, and of course I had my phone to the Bluetooth on whatever music I had, and started up the vehicle, and Vacation by the Go-Go's came on.
Oh, that's old school.
And I just started laughing. Yeah. Because it was probably the best song that could have come on, because not only was I going on vacation, I was going on retirement.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I drove out of the parking garage of the Austin Police Department just laughing. It was a great moment. Yeah,
it's interesting. And just as recently as yesterday, I received a text from somebody or a message, but people ask me, like I'm sure they asked you many times, how's retirement? And my response is, I highly recommend it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Our uncle, my wife's uncle, my uncle, he's a retired lieutenant with the Texas Department of Public Safety. And he says every day Saturday. Yeah. Yeah, which is true, because sometimes I wake up and I don't know what day it is. It's just Saturday.
Yeah. I know. I feel guilty sometimes. I'm like, man, okay. But anyways, well, we're going to talk about a lot more about what you're doing these days, because you although retired from the police department, you're staying active, doing some very, very great things. And we'll get into that. But, okay. So I want to talk about in some detail regarding your incident, the shooting on September 25th of 2010. I also want to talk about the great work you and your wife Cathy are doing with to help first responders. You guys started the organization, that peer support couple.
Right.
And we're going to go into some detail about that, but a little bit later on.
Sure.
So before we do that, let's talk about you. Where'd you grow up? Just briefly, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, a graduate of Oliver Wendell Holmes High School, go Huskies, and played baseball all my life. And then I went on to Incarnate Word, where I continued my baseball career, played there for about 3 years. at a certain point, I was like, hey, I need to graduate.
Right.
The whole student athlete thing. It's like after a while, you're like, yeah, I think I gotta finish this up. So I did, and that was around the time where we had Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and no one in my immediate family, my siblings, nobody served. We had other members of my family who had served in all the wars. And I remember just watching the call out for Desert Shield and then Desert Storm. And I just remember thinking, my family has had a blessed life in this country. And I just felt, for me, it was my obligation to give back to the country as a proud American. So even though I had a college degree, I basically said, I'm going to go into the military. And since being in San Antonio and being exposed to the Air Force the most, I remember growing up and seeing C-5 Galaxies fly over all the time,
Yeah.
I went to the route of the Air Force, and I was actually thinking about going into the journalist kind of route with the Air Force, because that's what my degree was in.
Okay.
Communications from Incarnate Word, a bachelor's degree. But there was always that other part of me that loved law enforcement. I mean, I am a kid of Adam 12.
Oh.
I'm dating myself, I know.
No, I love it. I love it.
But Adam 12, I remember watching that show religiously.
Yeah.
And that whole law enforcement thing was something that was always in the back of my mind, because I knew I couldn't be an astronaut.
Right.
Trigonometry, calculus, it wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
But even though I enjoyed journalism and writing and video production, radio production, there was always that call to serve. So I decided, I'm going to go into the Air Force, and I ended up going and enlisted with the mindset that I'll try and become an officer once I'm in.
Yeah.
But honestly, once I got in and I saw what NCOs did, non-commissioned officers, I said, that's what I want to be, a non-commissioned officer.
Yeah.
I want to be able to be in the mix with the other airmen. And then by a pure fluke, when I was at the recruiting office watching a video about, I should say video, it was one of those giant golden discs. And the recruiter told me, watch this, it's about basic training. And she says, there's another one about security police. You don't have to watch that at all. But I was like, security police? Okay, I'll give it a watch. And I realized, this is a law enforcement component for the United States Air Force.
Right.
And I was thinking to myself, it's all coming into fruition for me.
Yeah.
As far as like I wanted to be a cop. There's military police in the Air Force. So when my recruiter came back into the room, I was like, I want to be security police. And now we're called security forces. We're defenders. But when I went, I said, I want to be security police. And that's the path that I chose. And, it's just one of those things where it's the point of where my life got changed. Because if they would have chosen firefighter for me in the Air Force, I would have had a different life.
Right, totally.
Right. But I did get security police. I became security police. And so when it came time for me to get out, the natural progression was like, I want to be a cop.
Yeah.
And I applied for SAPD back home in San Antonio, and I was going through that process. I also applied for Austin PD because a buddy of mine said, hey, Austin's taking applications too. So I did, I'll do it as a secondary thing. But to be quite honest, the recruiters at Austin treated me so much better than the recruiters in San Antonio. I mean, they made me feel like they actually wanted me to be a part of the Austin Police Department.
Yeah.
So I thought about it long and hard, and I said, I really wanted to be a cop in San Antonio, but the ultimate dream is being a cop. I want to be in law enforcement. Yeah. And I'm going to go where they wanted me, or at least gave the appearance that they wanted me. So I chose Austin. And again, another decision that just changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And, here I am 23 years later. So I'm blessed, and it's a good life. And I love what I've done.
Yep.
I'm a proud veteran, I'm a proud defender, and I'm a proud Austin police officer. And I'm proud to see I'm retired.
Yeah, well, you've done a lot to get there, and well deserved.
Thank
for
you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So you played baseball. What position?
Pitcher. I was pitching in college. I played a lot of positions growing up, but I was always a bigger kid.
Yeah.
I was 12. I was 5'7".
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They're like, put that kid on the mound. I mean, he's throwing harder than anybody else. So eventually, I started pitching, and that's what I did through little league and senior league, and of course eventually into high school, and then in college. So I pitched in college.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love college baseball.
Yeah, I do too. they're hungry. They haven't forgotten about why they play the game, and that's important.
That's very important. Yes, for sure. And family, married?
Yes.
Cathy? Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been married?
We have been married 19 years.
Nice.
Yeah, 19 years. We've been together 21. Been married 19. So come next year, it'll be our 20th wedding anniversary. So that was another one of the good decisions that I made.
So far, you're doing well with your decisions. This is good.
Yeah, I mean,
good.
not all decisions have been great decisions, but the ones that have been a positive outcome in my life, of course, those have been the great decisions. And meeting Cathy and becoming a dad to her 2 kids, and living our lives together as two cops.
Yeah.
You know, it's been an interesting life.
Yeah. Well, good. What about, do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a brother and 3 sisters. My brother and I were the bookends. He's the oldest, I'm the youngest. And then 3 sisters in between, of course, my mom and dad, who started this whole whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, are any of the siblings in law enforcement?
No, I mean, I guess you could say I'm the black sheep of the family because I didn't do anything that anybody else did. My brother was in banking. He ended up running the family business for my dad when we had it, a paint and body shop. I have one sister who's an educator. She's a doctor at UTSA in San Antonio. She got her doctorate degree. I have one sister. She's a tough old gal.
Yeah.
She's like the closest sibling to me as far as like we're very close, and she's lived her life, and she's been able to rise above some of the trials and tribulations that she experienced in her life.
Yeah.
And part of what happened to her in her life is also what inspired me to go into law enforcement. And then my third sister, she's in banking too. So, you know, I mean, a lot of things that my siblings did were they were taking care of themselves and their families. And that's part of the reason why I was able to see how my family was able to thrive and live good lives and raise their kids, my nieces and nephews. That was just another reason why I wanted to serve. I wanted to give back.
Yeah. Well, you've done that.
Thank you.
And you're still doing that. So that's great. Okay. Let's talk about what happened on September 25th of 2010.
Okay.
If you can just, start at the beginning of you were working, what you were working, where you were assigned, the call itself, and then just walk us through what happened that night.
Sure. Well, back then I was working in Central East Austin, which we call Charlie Sector. And I worked on a night shift, 700 platoon. So my call sign was Charlie 780. All the corporals in Austin on patrol, they have an 80 designator, and then the first number is what platoon they're on.
Got it.
So I was Charlie 780, and I went into work, and I remember my sergeant and I, before we call it show up, some call it roll call, briefing, or whatever, lineup. Before show up, we were in the office, and we were talking about weapons and holsters and having to draw in unconventional positions and things like that. And it was just us talking about the tactics of it all. And then we went into a show up, and I remember walking in and all the officers sitting down and going to them and say, hey, safely, can you draw your pistol sitting down? Are you able to draw it in an unconventional position and whatnot? And that was part of show up training. And then we hit the streets. And I was supposed to go home early that day. I was what you call flexing out. So I should have gone home, maybe around midnight or so. But we got a call, as you always say, a call dropped, right?
Yeah,
we always hear all that, right?
Yeah.
A call dropped, and it was in Charlie Sector, of course, on Charlie Radio, that a woman called 911 saying that her boyfriend had a gun, and he was threatening to kill himself, and he had shot the gun inside the house. So immediately, just by the basis of what 911 got, that was considered a hot shot call.
Yeah.
You run lights and sirens, code 3. So there we go, boom, code 3, lights and sirens. And I remember a lot of officers headed that way. It was just one of those nights where it wasn't too busy, so a lot of officers were available. So we had a lot of officers going. And I remember I parked my patrol vehicle on the main street on FM 969, and we went down the street to where the house was. And I was walking behind officers, headed towards the address. And I remember I felt uncomfortable because the officers were bunched up on the sidewalk. We're heading towards it. And, I went back to my training with security forces about spreading out, like, a grenade blast or a mortar blast, get that distance, right? So I remember telling the officers, hey, guys, spread out. And as they spread out, through them, I could see a young couple hugging in the front yard. And I didn't know who they were. I thought maybe they were neighbors who were being looky-loos or something or whatever. But then the hug stops, and she starts walking towards the officers and me, and she's holding a cell phone in her hand. And it's destroyed. It's got a big hole in it. And somehow I realized this is them. And I think we all realized it. And I remember getting a hold of her and passing her off to an officer behind me saying, get her to safety, get her to cover, and find out what's going on from her. Get the intel. What do we got going on here with this guy? He was still in the front yard, and he had a gun down by his hand. So we took cover in the driveway next to his residence, behind a car. Officers spread out, taking cover everywhere. I remember even telling one of the officers, hey, knock out the garage light, illuminating us,
right,
so we could be in the dark. I don't think we ever replaced the light bulb, so sorry for that. But
that's good tactics.
Yeah. And then I remember, because we had so many officers, I told one of my officers, Brad Ray, I told him, go behind this house, go through that backyard, and try and flank him and get into his backyard. It was immediate military tactics. Let's go, flank, see what we can do to set up. And he's in the front yard, and we're behind this vehicle for cover. And I remember an officer said, Corporal, I was the highest ranking officer there at the time. Hey, Corporal, we have an officer here who's a negotiator. I was like, fantastic. All right. So I said, only allow whatever the officer's call sign was to talk to him. So he was talking to him, and the officer was positioned across the street from where he was. So he was looking towards his right, my left. And the officer was trying to talk to him. And I remember he was angry. He had the gun down by his side. And I remember him, answering a question as far like, what did he want? And he pretty much answered, I just want you guys to kill me.
He said that?
He said that. And my heart sunk. You've talked to a lot of cops. And we always get that feeling of like, this is going to go bad. This is not going to end well. Yeah, you felt it. So when he said that, I was like, man, this is not good. Somewhere along the way, my sergeant showed up, and his call sign was Charlie 790, Shane Lee. And when I saw that he was there, it's like, okay, protocol. He's now the on-scene commander.
Right.
I'm one of his troops. I'm going to do what he needs. And Shane was a SWAT officer at one time. So he began initiating protocols for a SWAT call-up and everything like that. The guy had gone into the house at a certain point.
He'd gone into the house?
Into the house. Yep. And then he came back with 2 guns in his hand. He was really pushing it. He really wanted us to shoot him.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, he had been shooting rounds in the house. And you could just hear the pop, pop, pop.
While you guys were there?
While we were there. You could hear the pop, pop, pop. The officers that were trying to flank him, they got stalled because he had 2 big Rottweilers, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, it was just not good. And eventually, he goes back in the house, and we hear the pop, 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 and then we hear one more pop. And I'm thinking, he probably just died by suicide. He probably just killed himself. So it's like, all right, what do we do now? And shortly after that, you could hear the garage door opening. And, we've all heard garage doors open in our lives, but it sounded so ominous. And it's opening slowly, and I'm thinking to myself, he's going to run out both guns, and he's going to start shooting at us, making us have to shoot him.
Right.
But that didn't happen. What I heard was a vehicle startup, a sports car type engine revving up. It was his girlfriend. She had a nice BMW, and he had the keys to it, so he was revving it up, and he just backed up out the driveway and took off opposite of where we were. and he was able to get out of the neighborhood. We thought we had it all blocked off, but he obviously knew his way better than we did.
Right.
So he was able to get to 969 and take off, and there was a pursuit. We were all running towards our vehicles, and something told me, the house, we got to own that house. That needs to be ours, because we don't know what's in there. We don't know if anybody else is in there. We got to own that house. I remember stopping, pivoting on my foot, and turning and yelling, we got to clear the house. By then, there was another corporal on scene, and we assembled a team of officers with shields and everything, and we entered the house. And the Rottweilers were now in the house, but I think they're probably more scared than we were, so they're just barking a lot.
Yeah.
But we were able to clear the house, and I remember seeing the bullet casings and the living room carpet. And that was a weird thing for me, because even though I'd heard all the gunshots and everything, there was something about seeing those casings on the living room carpet that I was like, this is real,
Yeah.
This is happening.
Yeah.
We cleared the house, and I was like, okay, well, my job now is to run the crime scene. He's taken off. Officers are trying to pursue him. That's my job.
So you stayed behind at the house?
I stayed behind.
Got it.
So I made the decision, well, I'd parked down the street on FM 969. I need to, I'm sorry, not 969, no, 973. Yeah. I've been all over Austin, so I was on the,
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, so it's a 973. So anyway, so I went and got my vehicle so I could bring it closer to where the residence was, because I was thinking, well, that's your office, right? And your mobile data computer's in there and everything. So that's what I was going to do. Well, I knew Cathy was at home, and I also knew this is going to make the media. I knew it was going to make the media one way or another. So I called her, because she was a trained negotiator for her department, Cedar Park Police Department. And I wanted to call her, one, so she could know, that I was okay, that I knew this was probably going to hit the news one way or another. And two, I wanted to get her insight as far as a negotiator. Like, if we encounter this guy again, what can we say? What can I say?
Yeah, some hooks.
Yeah, some hooks. So I called her, and she answered the phone. And I'm talking to her as I'm walking towards my police unit, and I'm walking down the street. Well, I didn't realize it, but he had come back to the scene. He was coming back to the scene. So
wow.
Yeah, as I'm on the phone with Cathy, all of a sudden, he's behind me, and he's doing donuts right behind me.
Right in front of the residence or near the residence?
No, on the intersection of 973
okay.
and the street that his house was on. He was doing donuts right there in front of me. And I mean, close. And so Cathy hears that in the background, and she hears me saying, oh, I got to go. And I hung up the phone so I could get in my vehicle and pursue the guy. And as Cathy will attest, she wasn't very thrilled about me doing that.
You're right, yeah.
And we do our public speaking. She'll tell people, don't do that. Right. Don't do what my husband did.
Yeah.
So she wasn't very thrilled about it. But as time goes on, she realizes, that, hey, she was angry. She sent a text saying, hey, don't ever do that again. But then she'll say it. What if that's the last text my husband reads?
Yeah.
So,
right.
So she sends a text, I love you, and be careful.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I managed it. I'm in the middle of a pursuit now, and I would manage it. I love you too.
Oh, check.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Drive with my knees, and I love you too. Put the phone away.
Yeah.
So he's got a huge lead, and officers are trying to keep up with him. And my thought was, I was there on scene. I saw what he was like. I didn't want any other officer, none of my officers or any other police officer, to face this guy alone. I wanted to be there. Maybe I could do something to talk him down. But that BMW, man, that thing could roar and it could fly.
Yeah.
Our air unit got involved. We had a DWI enforcement officer, Pat Oborski, who was working that night, that he got behind it, and he was out distancing, because Pat had like one of those Dodges.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just doing my best trying to keep up. Eventually, our helicopter, Air One, had to go down because of fuel.
Yeah.
So the Department of Public Safety, they took over. And at a certain point, I realized he's trying to go back to his house by the path he was taking, because we went all over Austin. I think we hit every major road in Austin. I call it the Tour de Austin, because we were all over. And when I realized he was going back to his house, I took a different route. And of course, when he's getting back to his residence, he knows he can't go back because there's hundreds, not hundreds,
it's locked down.
It's locked down. There's lots of police vehicles. So at a certain point down 973, we cross paths, and he points a gun at me, and I turn around, and he takes off again. Pataborsky and his DWI unit at the Dodge. He gets behind him. I get behind Pat. Now I'm calling the pursuit with the helicopter overhead, and the path we take, we end up heading towards the airport, the international airport in Austin, which I really had a big fear because I was worried he's going to pull into the airport, even though it's dark 30. I know we have our cops working there. He's going to pull into that airport and he's going to try and do something. And it's going to be a shootout.
Yeah. But
he bypasses it, and at a certain point, he stops his vehicle on Highway 71 over 183. And he stops, and he's shooting in the air. I don't know if he's actually trying to shoot at the helicopter, but he's shooting in the air where the helicopter's circling him. And we got a line of police vehicles lined up at a safe distance. And I got the radio, and I switched it over to PA, and I tried to talk to him. And I remember telling him, nobody wants to hurt you. We don't want to get hurt. We don't want to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Put the guns down. But, it's pretty loud. He's got the helicopter overhead.
Yeah. Yeah.
His state of mind, who knows if even if he would have heard me, would it have registered with him?
Right.
I just remembered that he was on the phone, talking to somebody, and at a certain point he hangs up the phone and he gets back in the vehicle. He takes off again. Well, since I was close to my vehicle on the PA, I was able to jump in and get right behind him. And he goes a little bit further down on 71, and he realizes that the road's blocked off. But he found one little part of the 71 to cross over onto oncoming traffic, and there was one truck with two gentlemen that had found an opening amongst all the block roads, and they were on the same road on 71 with him, so they went nose to nose.
Oh, wow.
And so he's on the wrong way of traffic, nose to nose, and I stop my vehicle and park it at an angle, and I see them, and he gets out of the BMW, and he's pointing the gun at the truck. And so he's either going to hijack the two guys and the truck, or he's going to kill the two guys. But it was basically, this can't go on any further.
It was a tense moment.
It was a tense
moment.
Yeah, it was a full moon that night, so the whole scene was illuminated. Plus both headlights facing each other. It was a pretty just well lit scenario right in front of me. So I remember stepping out of my vehicle and drawing my weapon, which is ironic because I just at show up, I was talking to officers about drawing your weapon in unconventional moments. I drew my weapon and I lined up my sights, and he had on a white T-shirt. It was just glowing, and I lined up my sights and I took one shot and he went down. What I didn't know is when he went down, he ended up putting the gun to his mouth and he pulled the trigger and he died by suicide.
Got it.
I did not know that. It was hours later that I found that out. So, he goes down. Officers form up on line to go get the two gentlemen out of the truck. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. That was an amazing moment to watch Austin police officers put their lives on the line for these two men in this truck that they didn't know.
Right.
They were getting them out of the vehicle. They were using their own bodies to shield them because, nobody knew if the guy was down or not for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And you talk about a finest hour for the Austin Police Department. That was that moment. I was a witness to them sacrificing themselves, putting themselves in potential danger to save two lives. And once they got them out of the vehicle, I remember walking around to what would have been the driver's side of the BMW, the passenger side of the truck, and I saw him on the ground, not moving. So my natural thought was, I killed him.
Right.
Right. So I immediately moved myself out of the scene.
Right.
You can't be in the crime scene that you're a part of. There has to be an investigation, right? So I removed myself from the scene and I went back to my vehicle. And I remember sitting down, and some of my officers and other officers were just like around me, checking on me, asking me what I needed, and I remember I was so thirsty. I drank all my water already. I was like, I just need more water. And they brought me water, and I think I chugged a giant container of water down like that. And, so it was, of course, what we call it's code 4. The scene's now code 4.
Yep, secure.
It's secure.
Yeah, we're good.
But, I knew that I was just involved in a shooting. And I always say 2 lives got changed that night, his and mine.
Yep.
His ended, and mine went on a path that I never would have anticipated, because I was no longer going to be the Javier Bustos that I knew. I was going to be a different man.
That's a lot of detail. So thank you.
You're welcome.
For sharing that. And I mean, you broke that down in great detail. So let me just back up. So when you had moved your car, because it's your office, right?
Yeah.
Everything's there.
Right.
And then he shows back up and he's doing those donuts. Where were the other officers that were pursuing him?
He had such a huge lead.
Got it. Yeah.
That they were so far behind.
Got it.
I mean, this BMW, I don't know, Z3, I think it was like that.
Yeah.
It could move.
Yeah. So he had a great distance
yeah.
between him and the officers. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. When you shot him and he went down, and obviously you thought you had killed him.
Right.
Turns out he committed suicide. What do you remember when you pulled the trigger and then instantaneously, pretty much, he went down? Do you remember your first thought at that moment?
You talk to a lot of shooters, and they all experience something similar and something different. And right before I took the shot, I had auditory exclusion, because I could not hear any other sirens. I could not hear anybody yelling or speaking, whatever. It was just a real calm silence. And when I took the shot, at that time I was carrying a Kimber 1911, 45 caliber.
Yep.
And if you ever shoot one of those without hearing protection, you're going to regret it.
Right.
But when I took my shot, it sounded like a little pah, like that. That's all I heard. The moment that he went down, that's when it was, I always describe it like if somebody had 2 giant amplifiers on both sides of my ears, like they turned it up to like 15, and all the sounds came back.
Oh, wow.
But I remember, as far as that first thought, it was just basically, I did it. You know, I did my job.
Yeah.
I had to stop a threat. And, every officer that shoots their weapon, they have different thoughts, things like that. But for me, it was like, I did it. I stopped them. So that was in that quick moment of that thought process, like, okay, I did it. He's down.
And you were able to do it.
Yeah.
Because, we all sign up for this job.
Right.
And believing or thinking we can do it. And most times, the vast majority of times, the officer does. There's every now and then there may be an issue where somebody was unable to do it. You know? And not to be critical of anybody, but that's just, it happens, So when you, getting back to the scene, before you shot him, when you got out of your car to the time you pulled that trigger, what was the time span?
Oh, geez.
Was it long or short?
It was milliseconds. It was just a couple of seconds.
So you got out of your car, saw the threat that he was there, and took the shot.
Lined it up and took the shot, yeah.
So I'll ask this question because some other people we've interviewed have experienced this that have been in shootings. You said the sound went away for you, all sound.
Right.
And it was just, what you did hear was from that 45 was just that little faint sound.
Yeah, it was pah.
Did time slow down for you?
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk even though your incident was like very fast from the time you got out,
right,
you took a shot, in that time, do you recall what you experienced with time slowing down?
Oh, yeah, time slowed down. And then, of course, I got tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And like I had said earlier, it was a full moon, and then, of course, the headlights from both vehicles, the scene was illuminated where he was standing. But I still had tunnel vision, and I remember seeing his white T-shirt and focusing on that. And I always tell people, if they ever saw The Patriot, Mel Gibson.
Sure.
Long
ago, but yes.
What did he teach his kids about shooting? Aim small, miss small.
Oh.
And I was quite a distance away. I was about maybe 93 feet away.
That's a good distance.
Yeah, but it didn't register like that. It was that far.
Yeah.
I mean, it did, but it didn't. I knew I was far, but the way my vision was, the tunnel vision and everything, it seemed like he was like maybe 10 feet away.
Wow.
So I was experiencing that too. And it was slow because, you know, if there was some way to plug into my memories and play the scene out as how I saw it versus real time on video, I'm sure it'd be two different things. I'm sure that
right.
how I saw it and how it was a little way slower than the actual reality of it all.
At the time of the shooting, were you wearing a body cam or did you have a vehicle camera?
No, we didn't have body cams back then. You know, this is 2010, so we didn't have them yet. But we did have the vehicles had digital systems.
Right.
But even just to show how time has gone by, the video systems that we had in the patrol vehicles, it was still videotape.
Oh, I remember those days.
Yeah,
yes.
remember?
Yeah, I do.
You popped it in, you closed it up, locked it up.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So you know, as part of the investigation, they had to seize my video.
Right.
As part of evidence.
Right.
So so it was captured on the vehicle camera, because the way I parked my vehicle at an angle, it just was right on the scene. So it was seeing my camera recorded pretty much what I was seeing. Of course, it's in real time.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you had mentioned that when you realized what happened, that you had shot somebody, you said the life of Javier Bustos was not going to be the same from that moment on.
Right.
What did you mean? I mean, like the immediate impact or soon after, what did you experience in how did it affect you?
Well, for me, there is like, I don't want to say two, but there was the part of me that I was very proud of myself because my training kicked in. Another cliche we all say, right?
True. Yeah.
My training kicked in, and when my number was called, I answered the call, and I was able to stop a threat and save 2 lives. So I felt a little bit of elation, you know, and pride. And I think I rid that high for a little while. But then when you go back to the Special Investigations Unit and you're calming down,
right,
and there's the adrenaline dump, then you're starting to realize, okay, I just shot somebody, they're dead. What's going to happen to me?
Right.
You know, I mean, Austin has always been a political city. And, you know, we had other officer-involved shootings that activists tried to say were not good shootings.
Right.
And so there was that worry, like, well, are they going to come after me? You know? So then I started to get worried, like, what's going to happen to me? You know, we had an officer in Austin, John Coffey, who was in a shooting where he was put to the ringer, as was his family. And he, to his credit, he held his head high, but I remember what John went through. And I didn't want that to happen to me.
Right. So
I remember thinking, I got to get people to watch our house. And I got to make sure all my family's safe. I mean, there was those kind of protocols. And even Cathy was thinking the same thing too.
Right.
When she was at the home waiting, and then when she finally was able to meet up with me at SIU, was like, what's going to happen? You know, I was just involved in a shooting. And, you know, ironically, and I haven't mentioned this, but the individual that I shot was a white male. But it was in East Austin, which is a predominantly black Hispanic area of Austin at the time. So when the first article came out on the Austin American Statesman, they got a quote from the local NAACP leader in the city of Austin about high-profile shootings and whatnot, until they found out that the guy that I shot was a white male, and the narrative changed.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, you know, yeah, it's you know, when oftentimes, you know, working in as a law enforcement officer, you're going to be second guessed.
Right.
A shooting, something else, use of force, decision. And I think a lot of times where the officer's mindset is, okay, they're going to come after me for whatever reason. That's their agenda.
Right.
But man, they're going to come after my family too.
Right.
And you don't really think about that when you sign up to become a police officer, that sometimes my actions, which are justified,
Right.
it's going to affect a a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
that are close to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't seem fair.
No, it's not fair. And, and it's not fair that regardless of the race or ethnicity of the person that I did shoot, the point was that there was criminal activity that was going on and he was threatening people. That should be the story.
Yes.
But it's not always driven that way.
Right.
Because what's going to sell papers?
Oh, yeah.
What's going to get people to watch the news? The possibility that, could this be a bad shooting, or could this be a shooting where it involves an officer being of one race and the suspect being of another,
right,
or ethnicity? That's the sad thing about it, is we don't allow the system to work. The system's already being pushed by a narrative that's created sometimes. And it's hard. I feel for anybody when they're involved in anything and they're just being crucified by the media because they don't have the full story.
So true. It's interesting because, and we'll get back to this, but I just want to, there was an article that you wrote an essay, or I should say there was a website,
right,
Officer Involved, that you wrote an essay for,
right,
which I read. And you talk about that for many years up to this incident, you watched the show Cops.
I did.
And since that incident, you have not watched that show Cops.
No.
And I really thought about that. And I read it, last week.
Mm-hmm.
And then just this morning, before our interview,
right,
I was watching the local news of a Fort Worth cop who's on trial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know details of that case at all,
mm-hmm,
but I just saw it this morning. But he was testifying. They had video of him testifying. And I don't know the circumstances, but I thought about what you'd said. I'm like, this guy, people have no idea what's going on,
right,
with him right now.
Right.
Attacks on him, his family, whoever. Mm-hmm. But it's the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's interesting, like with your case where they put it out there, oftentimes what is said that's exaggerated, mm-hmm, or to get readers or viewers, and is wrong, and then the truth comes out. A lot of times you can't change people's mind,
no,
from what they heard the first time.
No, you can't. I mean, think about it. Even up to now, modern times with the social media and media being on your phone, what do we do sometimes? We read the headline and then we scroll up.
Totally.
Right?
So true.
We don't take time to read the story.
Yeah. There's so much news out there. You're just moving on to the next one.
Yeah. So a lot of times judgments are being made on a person or a case or whatever the situation by just the headline.
Yes.
And that's actually not very good for us as a society to do that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you're right.
So they everything's being done by the headline or one quote on video.
Right.
And
with editing.
And the editing. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Right now, we're talking. Well, you could go back and you could edit this in so many different ways where it sounds like I'm saying it differently.
Right.
And you could have 10 different versions of what I've said, and it's all going to sound different.
Yeah.
It's the selective editing.
Yeah.
So when you have that, when you have people scrolling up, only reading a headline, or looking at an edited portion of video, it distorts the mind.
Yeah.
And
right.
and you can't think clearly because you're not allowed to think clearly. So you make a snap judgment.
Right.
And then you move on.
You move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So let's get back to your shooting. What are some of the things you say you get home? You've got to go to bed at some point.
Yeah.
From that moment on, or what did you experience? I mean, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever. What did you experience over time that night, and then over time, based on that shooting?
Okay.
Was it easy or difficult?
My mistake was thinking that I was just gonna plunge right through this, and I was gonna be okay.
Yeah.
That I did my job, and I stopped the threat. Unfortunately, somebody lost their life, but I was thinking, okay, I did my job. That's what we're supposed to do. It wasn't until, of course, I got home when I started experiencing the flashbacks and the memories of what happened, hours earlier, and I was seeing the scene play over in my head and head over again, which I call it the movie screen of the mind.
Yeah.
and I couldn't shut it off. And you read it in that little essay that I'd written, that every time I closed my eyes, I would see the shooting scene happen over and over again. And that was very traumatic. So even though I was laying in bed, the scene was playing over and over again, and I couldn't shut it off. Years now, I understand what I was going through, but when I'm going through it, it's just like, why can't I stop this image? And you'd mentioned the show Cops, what I had watched religiously since it first, came to television back in the 80s.
Yeah. Yep.
I used to, of course, modern times, I used to DVR it. Oh,
That's right. There was no TiVo.
Yeah, I used to DVR it, and I would save episodes and watch them on days off. And since I couldn't sleep, and the scene was replaying over and over again in my mind, I just got the remote control, and I was just deleting every single Cops episode because I didn't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah.
And then that's when I realized, people watch Cops for entertainment, but through them gaining entertainment, sometimes they're watching these cops go through real life incidents, and sometimes those real life incidents are traumatic.
Yes.
So that's why I can't watch Cops anymore, because when they show those hot scenes that people love, it makes me think about, what are those guys going through at that moment? What are they thinking about? And what were they thinking about once they got home? Yeah. So I just decided, no, I can't watch it anymore.
Yeah. So you, did you, were you having difficulties besides sleeping with, engaging with people or anything like that? Were you, besides the not sleeping, what else did you experience?
Well, you automatically go into this protective mode for yourself and for your family. And you automatically start thinking, okay, my name's going to be released and everybody's going to know who I am. Right? And once your name does get released, then it's out there.
Right.
And people are trying to find out who you are. And they'll look up your social media. They're going to look up for anything that they can say, oh, look what he posted, or look what he said once, things like that, right? Because now it's all about demonizing.
Yeah.
Right? So I remember being very worried about everywhere I went, people were going to recognize me. And I know other officers I've talked to, you're worried about if you go to the store and you pull out your credit card or your debit card and they read your name. And you're thinking to yourself, they're going to know it's me.
Right.
They're going to read my name and they're going to know that I'm that Javier Bustos that was involved in the shooting. You just go into that mode where you just feel like all eyes are on you. And that's tough.
It's a big weight.
It is a big weight. And, it changes you. It 100% changes you because you're going through so much trauma. And if you don't have a way to talk to somebody about that trauma, the trauma gets worse. And of course, we're alluding to the future of this conversation, but that's when the peer support is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And, it's back in the day when I started, it was if you were involved in a critical incident, shooting, whatnot, it was like you just kind of dealt with it.
Right.
And then over time, and we'll get to what you guys do now, you and Cathy.
Sure.
But you're doing what, had we known many years ago, a lot of lives would have been changed for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But so you sought help, or did you not seek
I
help?
did.
And did you do it? I'm sorry. Did you do it voluntarily, or were you told to go?
Well, it's funny because Cathy has been in law enforcement longer than I have, and she was already a trained peer. So I was able to talk to her and ask questions about should I be experiencing this right now, or I'm experiencing this, and she was able to at least tell me that what I'm experiencing was a normal reaction.
Okay, that's probably reassuring.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
and that was a big help. But at the same time too, this is a flood of emotion and trauma hitting me, right? So I mean, she can only do as much as she can to stave it off.
Right.
But she's experiencing it also, because even though I was the officer involved in the shooting, she is also part of this traumatic incident as the spouse of an officer who's been involved in the shooting.
Right.
And even though she was a law enforcement officer, she was experiencing it as a law enforcement officer, but she was experiencing it more as my wife.
Right.
And same thing for me. When she experienced critical incidents, I experienced it as her husband and an officer. So, it wasn't easy for her either. We were coming off of another traumatic incident about a month before when there was a line of duty death at her department. So we're not even over that yet, or even able to process that yet. And then here we are again amongst the trauma again.
Right.
It's like trauma is our companion.
Yeah, it's with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good that it was great that you had Cathy there with you.
Right.
You could bounce some ideas off of, or
right.
ask some questions.
Yeah.
And is that where it stopped, or did you actually go get more help?
We had peer support at Austin Police Department. Okay. And so Dan Armstrong was the peer support sergeant at that time. And he told me that they wanted to have a debriefing with me about the shooting. And even though Cathy was trained peer support, I was still a little bit leery about, well, what's this debriefing? Because you go through an officer-involved shooting, and of course you have to get interviewed and give your statements to internal affairs for the administrative part of it. And then you also have to give your statements to SIU
right.
for the criminality of it.
Right.
Because even though I'm a cop,
right.
I discharge my firearm.
That's right.
So you're kind of worried about talking. But the thing about it with the debriefing is it's not a tactical review. And we even say that when we do debriefings as peers. This isn't a tactical review of what's going on. This is a review about your emotion and your trauma. This is what it's all about. But I didn't understand that. Yeah. So at first I was hesitant, but I did do it. And when I sat in the circle for that debriefing, and there was other officers there and our dispatchers, I realized that I wasn't alone. I was the tip of the spear.
Right.
I'm the one that pulled the trigger. But so many other people were affected by this incident in different ways that I realized, I'm not alone on this. There's other people. I got people.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was very helpful. And of course, we had a department psychologist that was on staff and everything. So we had the peer support, and we had the clinician in place that I was able to go to and get help. So I was fortunate that the Austin Police Department had that in place. It's not like that everywhere else.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's critical that it should be.
Yeah, it is critical. It's important.
Yes.
It should be a mandatory thing that if a department doesn't have the ability to have a peer support team, that they should somehow partner up with other departments and make a regional peer support team. But have that peer support in place.
Yes.
Because it's so important. It saves lives.
Yeah, it saves lives after an incident.
Yes. But it also saves lives before an incident could ever happen.
Right.
Yeah.
It's, I guess what I'm saying when I'm saying after the incident, because people experience things where maybe suicidal thoughts or whatever, to cope with it or end it.
Right.
And the peer support definitely helps out. And it is very, you're right. It's being proactive as well. Is also very, very critical.
Right.
So obviously you're anxious after the shooting because you're concerned about people are going to recognize me. My family's experiencing this with me. My friends are experiencing this with me.
Right.
I've just shot somebody who obviously you learned after the fact, hours later, that you didn't kill him.
Right.
But even though you learned that he committed suicide after you shot him, was there any, with the criminal investigation, was there a criminal investigation?
Oh, yeah.
And then what was the outcome of that?
Well, I had to go in front of the grand jury.
Okay.
It was the case was brought to grand jury because even though I didn't kill him, it's still considered an aggravated assault.
Right.
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 So I had to face the grand jury for that, and that's very daunting.
Yes.
Because you're in a room with 12 citizens, and they don't know you, you don't know them, and they're going to make a decision about your life that's going to affect your life either way.
Right.
Whether it's a no bill or basically not guilty, a no bill and doesn't go to trial, or it's a true bill and you have to go to trial.
Right.
But you're at that fork in the road at that moment in time, because how's it going to go?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
In my mind, in my heart, I knew that it was what we call a good shoot, which a lot of citizens that don't understand what that means.
Right.
You know, a good shoot, where it was lawful.
It was justified.
It was justified.
Yep.
It was tactically sound. So I knew that. But even though I knew that, 12 citizens had to be convinced.
Right.
What I knew. So that was nerve-wracking. And once I got no billed, you know, of course, that's another hurdle where some of the stress can go away.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I knew now legally I was okay, right?
Right.
Criminally, legally, I was okay. But that doesn't stop the mental trauma. It doesn't stop the memories. It doesn't stop what people think about you. None of that stops.
Right.
Nor will it ever stop.
Right.
So
yeah, it's not going to go away.
No, it'll never go away. And I think that's what happens sometimes with first responders after a critical incident is it's never going to go away. It's always going to be there as part of your life. But you're at that fork in the road is how are you going to make this part of your life where it doesn't just tear you down?
Right.
And that's another fork in the road, like I said, that first responders go through is after all the investigations are over, it's still there.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
They're still going to feel it. And they have to decide, how am I going to take this? How am I going to deal with it? And which direction am I going to go? Am I going to let this consume me and overtake me? Or am I going to make this part of my life, learn from it and get the help I need and move forward where it's just a part of my life? My shooting doesn't define me.
Right.
You know, it's one part of my life. I've had other incidents in my life, other milestones in my life that make the whole of me, but the shooting isn't all of me. So it's tough. And that's where first responders need to be able to rely on that peer support and competent clinicians who know about first responders to get that help so they can move forward.
Yeah, I on board with that. I think a lot of times there's help out there. Sometimes the first responders may not even know about it.
Right.
And they're dealing with something and they want the help. They just don't know where to go, or they may be hesitant to ask.
Right. And that's where the importance of peer support.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you asked earlier about what did I do to get the help? Well, peer support and a clinician in Austin PD. But I also was fortunate enough so many years down the road that we attended a post-critical incident seminar at Sam Houston State University. It's at the Bill Blackwood Law Enforcement Management Institute, or we call it LEMIT. That's where Cathy went to her law enforcement command college. Well, they started a post-critical incident seminar, which we both went to, which is important for first responders. If there's a PCIS, as we call it for short, if they can go to a PCIS, because you get the help there and you get to talk to other peers who have been through critical incidents. You get to talk to clinicians. Some PCIS will offer massages, as they say, the issue's in the tissue.
Oh, right. Right.
But it's an intense 3-day seminar that they can go to and bring their spouse or significant other with them and get the help. And we went through one of those. And it was helpful for me, but it was really helpful for Cathy too.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, she was on the job and she went through a lot of things before we got together. And of course, after we got together, and PCIS really helped her and it helped our marriage.
Wow.
Yeah. I think honestly, if it wasn't for PCIS, we probably would have been divorced. We would have been a statistic.
Yeah.
So Texas PCIS was a lifesaver.
Yeah. Thank goodness you went.
Yeah.
And you experienced that.
Yeah.
So your shooting was in 2010.
Right.
How many years did you work after that before you retired?
Okay, that was 2010, so 12 more.
That was 22? Okay.
Yeah, 2022.
So, and you went back to patrol?
Yeah, always stayed patrol.
And how long from the time the shooting, that September 10th, to your first day back to work?
You know, I think about it now, and it had to have been maybe November, December, maybe.
Oh, okay, so fairly quick.
Fairly quick.
So
big mistake.
Well, I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Was that by choice? I'm good to go.
I wanted to get back.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back. You know, you you miss the officers, you miss the job, you miss being around everybody. And so I pushed myself to get back.
Do you remember your very first like hot call?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And what it was and what you experienced like emotionally and mentally?
I remember we had a call of a man who pointed a gun at somebody. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go, right?
Yeah, here we go, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it just turns out that I was the first one on scene that found the guy. And he would not show me his hands. And it was that scenario where it was me and him, and I'm standing again right there at my patrol vehicle, like when I was involved in my shooting, same position, gun pointed, and he's not showing his hands. And nobody could get to me. It was just one of those moments where everybody else was on a call or, distance-wise, nobody could get to me fast enough. And I remember dispatcher, Mark, great guy. I could just hear his voice over and over, just almost like pleading. Charlie 780 needs a backup.
Wow.
Or as we call it, a 1075. Charlie 780 needs a 75 now.
Yeah.
Because he knew what I went through.
Sure. He's looking out for you.
He's looking out for me. Always did, all the way up until I retired. And I remember hearing his voice on the radio, and he was stressed out.
Yeah.
I got a guy in front of me. He's not showing me his hands. And then he does, and his hand has got a shirt wrapped around it. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is not good.
Not good.
Yeah.
He's hiding something, or something's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
But he complied, and he went down on the ground, and officers eventually did show up, and they moved up and they cuffed him and everything, and he didn't have anything in his hand. It was wrapped up.
Just wrapped up?
It was just wrapped up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Talk about milliseconds, defining a moment.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So it's code 4 again, and I remember sitting in my vehicle, and I'm hyperventilating. I'm combat breathing is out the window.
Right, yeah.
I'm just like, and it took me a while to calm down, But what do? Oh, okay, yeah, that sucked.
Right.
Let's go to the next call.
Did you tell him? Did you go back? I mean, just next call? Got back?
Yeah, just next call. Yeah, whatever happened next.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I asked that because one of the officers, a retired officer that we interviewed on this podcast early on, was involved in was actually shot.
Right.
And shot someone. But not to go over the whole story, but he was shot point blank in the face. Went through surgeries, was back to work 4 months later.
Wow.
His first call on his way to work was a burglary suspect running. Long story, turns out he's first on scene, or he's one of the first on scene.
Yeah.
Turns out not to be a burglary suspect. They canceled the call, and he said he went to the station and just kind of went in a room and was wondering, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And he pushed through and ended up having a great career, but for him, it was too soon as well. And he sought help as well. But so I was interested on your feeling of your first hot call and how you handled that. So it sounds kind of similar.
Yeah.
To what Ray went through.
The call was handled.
Yeah.
But I was not handling it emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I say I really should have waited before I came back.
Yeah.
So, but we're people of service.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And we want to get back because we say I want to get back in the game, but we're going to get back to serving the public.
Yeah.
But sometimes we do that to our detriment.
Yeah, exactly right. So, okay. So you've gone through a lot. You've had a great career.
Right.
Experienced a lot. You had your critical incident with the shooting. You mentioned Cathy, also in law enforcement.
Right.
Who just a month before your shooting at her police department, is it Cedar Creek?
Cedar Park.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Cedar Park. An officer was killed.
Right. Line of duty death.
Line of duty death there. So a lot going on.
Right.
And Cathy was a negotiator, trained negotiator, peer support in her background. And you end up retiring. Cathy, she's retired?
She retired in 2019 as a lieutenant.
Okay, so 2019, so just before you.
Right, she outranks me. But let's be honest, I could be chief of police and she's still going to outrank me.
Oh, yeah. We speak this. I get it. So you're both retired.
Right.
And at some point, the two of you start a company, or I say company, an organization to help people.
Right.
And I'll let you explain that, but it's called That Peer Support Couple.
Right.
So how did that come about? What year did you start it, and what do you guys do?
Okay. Well, it came about around 2017, where we had basically evolved to the point where we were in Officer Involved, the documentary that Patrick Shaver did, and we were like, okay, that's a good thing. Even though we were fooling ourselves, we were not well when we were actually in that documentary. You look at us in that documentary, and we thought we were fooling everybody, and we weren't. But because of the documentary, there was an interest where people started asking us, well, could you come talk, present your story and whatnot. So we ended up saying, sure, yeah, we'll do it. And we ended up going to Washington State to speak at a conference. And we had prepared our presentation. We had decided, the one thing that we both hated as cops, that we weren't going to BS anybody. We were going to be honest and real. And we put this presentation together. But we were asked, well, what do we call y'all? And, we had become peers at the PCIS in Texas. And one day, another peer was looking for us, and they're like, where's Cathy and Javi? And we walked into the room. And he said, oh, there's that peer support couple.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I said, when the time came for this conference, I was like, well, call us that peer support couple. Cathy was at work. I was on a day off. So I just told her, oh, yeah, it's handled. We're going to fly up to Washington, blah, 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 and everything. And it wasn't until like the information about the conference starts coming out, and she sees that peer support couple. And she's like, what is this? Are you nuts? And I was like, trust me, it'll stick. It'll stick.
It's catchy.
Yeah, it's catchy. 2017 is catchy.
Right.
So that's what I said that's what I named us. She begrudgingly had to accept it, but it took off. And we went up to Washington State, and we were kind of like, all right, we're two cops from Texas. If they don't like us and we bomb, we'll go back to Texas. We're one and done. We'll be good.
Right. Yeah.
But it was well received, and so we started getting more interest about speaking at conferences. So it kind of grew. And so that's what we were doing. We saw that it had value. What we were talking about was field tested by Cathy and I, as far as like, here's what the mistakes that we did,
right,
and here's what we did to get better. So now we're sharing with all of you. It just kind of grew on its own to where we were able to speak at conferences, and we were also doing peer support at National Police Week every year. So our friends that were also peers there from Oklahoma, they came and watched this, and we were like, oh, there's our friends from Oklahoma, come to see us speak.
Nice,
This is great. Well, they had started an organization called Warriors Rest, and they're kind of vetting us to see if we could come on board with them. So they kind of knew us when we were barely that peer support couple. We knew them before they were Warriors Rest, just first responders out of Oklahoma, and it evolved. And now Warriors Rest is one of the standards as far as peer support and mental health help in the nation, and Cathy and I are part of them.
Wow.
Yeah, so it evolved from 2017 from just saying, okay, we're going to go to Washington State and do this presentation, to now we're with Warriors Rest, and we're helping people.
Which is great. I commend you both for that. So when you, for that peer support couple,
mm-hmm.
is it really, you just go around, I say just, but you go around to these conferences and teach and say, this is what we do, and
right.
Or do you offer actually peer support?
Well,
how does that work?
It's interesting because like anybody that goes to a conference for first responders and they hear the presentations, somebody's going to get triggered,
mm-hmm.
Not purposely, but Cathy or I or any other presenter might say something that's going to reach out and trigger somebody in that audience. So there are times inevitably that you end up hearing somebody after your presentation. They'll come up to you and say, hey, can I talk to you? And what you said made me think about this.
Wow.
And since we're trained peers, trained to ICISF peers, we go right into peer mode.
Sure.
It's like, okay, this person's having a crisis. We gotta address it.
And the beauty about it is that you can address it because we have the training as peers through ICISF. So yeah, it does happen. And, a lot of conferences that we've seen, it's important that if you're going to have a conference for first responders, you probably might want to think about having your local peer support team or bringing in a peer support team at these conferences, because it happens all the time.
Right.
Warriors Rest, we do a lot of work with the concerns of police survivors, and they have what they call the traumas of law enforcement training. They have so many a year, and we always go and sit in the back of the classrooms as peers, because somebody gets traumatized.
And you're there for them.
We're there for, and we also bring along our clinicians. We call them our clinicians our mentals. It's a term of endearment, but the clinicians, we call them mentals.
Right.
So, you got your peers, you got your mentals. So we're able to address people who are triggered and experiencing some trauma. So that way they just don't go home and they're stuck in that wheel of never-ending trauma.
Yeah.
It's able to be addressed at the conference.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you have a staff, and is there a way that people can help or, support your that peer support couple by, financially or volunteering time or just in any way? Do you have options for people to help you guys?
Well, it's funny because one time we were asked by a gentleman who ran a different organization. He's like, well, how big's your staff? Who's on your staff? And I was like, it's us two.
Right.
We're a little mom and pop thing.
Right.
But through our travels and because of PCIS and being part of Warriors Rest Foundation, you go all over the United States, and you meet other peers. So we have a network of friends who are peers all over the United States. So if somebody in Colorado says, hey, I got somebody in a different state that needs some help, and they contact us, and it's that moment where like, oh, we got somebody.
Yeah, you have that relationship with a lot of people around the country.
Right. So it's just a matter of texting some phone calls and then getting the person in crisis the help that they need. So it's not an official peer support team.
Right.
It's a loose network of peers all over the United States that we know that if we can't find a peer, we can contact somebody else who can get another peer. And that's the beautiful thing about it is it's a community.
Yeah, you have that partnership, relationship.
It's a partnership and a relationship, and it's really a small community, as you're experiencing. And Jeff McGreevy, who's been on the
great
show.
Guy.
Yeah, great guy. He's doing his thing too. And when you start seeing all these organizations out there that are working to help first responders, it's really small. And there's interconnectedness amongst all of us in one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing, because there's not going to be one organization that can say, we're going to do peer support for everybody.
Right.
We're going to be the source.
Right.
But if everybody takes a slice of the cake and works on that slice, the whole cake's going to get taken care of.
Oh, yeah.
So there shouldn't be any rivalries. There shouldn't be we're the better than you. It should be basically, let's all work together, because you know what? Trauma's out there, and it is so deep in the first responder community that there's a lot of people that need help. So we all should just pitch in.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk, we've been saying peer support, but that involves, law enforcement, firefighters, dispatchers, others as well. So, because everyone in that, public safety,
right,
they're exposed, they witness, and they're involved in a lot of critical things that the people who are not first responders see or witness.
You're right. And it's funny because when we started off with that peer support couple, on our business cards, it said law enforcement peer support. Well, now it says first responder peer support.
Yeah.
And Warriors Rest, the same thing too. It was law enforcement peer support. Now, you got to cover the whole community. And we have peers in Warriors Rest that are from fire, from PD, and that's important. A good peer support team is going to work is when you have the right peers for the people. So you can't truly specialize and say, well, we only do law enforcement. well, I can peer somebody who's another cop because that's the peer.
Right.
But, if somebody's a paramedic or EMS or a firefighter, could I peer them? Yeah, I could help them. But what's the gold standard? Getting a peer from their profession, from their discipline.
Speaks their language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's okay. So that's good to know. And what we'll do is in the show notes for the podcast, we'll put down the link to that peer support couple,
Warriors
Rest, and yeah, for sure. We'll put those in there. People can look at those, follow the link, and learn all about you guys and the great work you guys are doing to serve others. Great story. And I know Cathy's busy.
Yeah. She's leveling up. She's a trained peer, but she's also been working on her education as far as she got her associate's degree, she got her bachelor's degree, and she's finishing up her master's degree, and she's going to be a clinician.
That's awesome.
She's going to be a mental.
That's there you go. Yes.
Yeah. So I say she's leveling up.
Yeah.
Which has been an amazing journey for her, and for me, the privilege to watch this evolution, because I just noticed as time has gone by, when we do our public presentations or we're out there working, helping people, I see less of a peer and I see more of a mental out there.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah, she's so on it.
You've seen it.
Yeah,
The change, the progression.
Yeah, she's so on it. It's amazing. I mean, it makes me proud as her husband.
Yeah.
What she's accomplished, not only in law enforcement, but in life. And the fact that, she's going to be a mental and she's going to be able to help first responders at that level, to me, that's really amazing.
Yeah, well, good for her.
Yeah.
Continue that education and then doing something that she's passionate about.
Yes.
And yeah, that's fantastic. So, thank you to Cathy as well.
Yeah.
Although she's not here, she's a huge part of this story.
Oh, she's a big part of the story. I mean, there wouldn't be that peer support couple if it wasn't for her being the other half of that couple.
It'd be that peer support guy.
Yeah, I'd be that peer support guy.
Yeah, so
doesn't have a good ring, does it?
No,
yeah.
The couple thing is much better.
Yeah.
So thank you for being so candid about your incident, your shooting, and I wanted to bring that. I really wanted to get into that before we talked about that peer support couple because it changed your life.
It did,
and it's important to know what changed your life and how you got more involved in helping others. You experienced it. So thank you for being so open in that story.
My pleasure.
Being a veteran of the United States Air Force, yes.
Yeah, hoorah.
Yes. You served 7 more years than I did, but I only did 4. But thank you for your service.
Thank you.
To our nation. Thank you for your years of service to the law enforcement community.
Thank you.
Cathy, too, did her time, retired as a lieutenant, so good for her.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate you spending time with us today, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today on the Behind the Line podcast.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Javier. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like the show, please follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the show notes from each episode, visit behindthelinepod.com. If you want to support the show and hear more from our first responders and military veterans, head over to patreon.com/behindtheline. I'll see you on the next one.